just to say a warm welcome to the Institute of Philosophy and Technology. And we are thrilled that this year's IB Talk series opens with a talk on swarm ethics. Both speakers are from the House of Ethics and have an impressive academic background and portfolio. And our institute has a long partnership with the House of Ethics, just to say a note. And Katja Rausch is the founder of the House of Ethics and author of Swarm Ethics, and she is a business strategist and specialized in ethics applied to IT, AI, and emerging technologies. And Daniele Proverbio is a scientist, writer, innovator, and thinker, and he is the co-author of Swarm Ethics and the director of interdisciplinary research of the House of Ethics. We are extremely pleased to have you with us and open this year's IPD Talk series. And the stage is yours, Katja and Daniele.
Well, Kalispera, good evening, everybody. So very happy that I don't see any slides. Is that normal?
Not yet. I just wanted to greet all the people in person, showing face, and then I'm going to share the slides.
Yes, fine, because voila, good. So thank you so much for everybody for joining us for our presentation tonight on Swarm Ethics, a new collective and decentralized ethics in the digital age. Janis Stamatelis, please allow us also to thank you for your invitation and granting us the enormous privilege to present our work that we started 1.5 years ago with Daniele. And we could not imagine how fast swarm ethics would become so relevant. And everything started actually in November 2022 with ChatGPT being launched worldwide. It was an industry scale and a high-speed phenomenon, a systemic infiltration. And this phenomenon was beyond technology. It was a techno-push on humanity. And we all saw how quickly ethics and regulation were outpaced in this non-linear, complex, uncertain environment. And that's exactly the kind of environments where swarm ethics thrives. And tonight we will go through two questions, actually. What is swarm ethics and why now? And first we will start with the concept. Compared to traditional ethics, which finds its heritage in philosophy and cognitive sciences, swarm ethics is leaning on swarm intelligence and is multidisciplinary. It stands at the crossroads of three disciplines: anthropology, complex systems, and digital technologies. So it transcends the closed normative systems of values that we know in virtue ethics, consequentialist ethics, or deontological ethics. But more than the concept, swarm ethics actually is a system, and that's very important because we all are individuals. But within swarm ethics, we are not singletons anymore. We are integrated as systems, open systems that we are, in larger open systems, communities, families, professional networks. So we are open systems within open systems. And the key word here is hyperconnectivity. You should know that daily we process 74 gigabytes of information, which equals to 16 movies a day. When we compare that to 500 years ago, which is the times where Shakespeare was born, there was Galileo, Newton, Descartes, Louis XIV. Well, they were processing 74 gigabytes of information during a lifetime. We do it during a day. So this hyperconnectivity is key in our new approach to systemic ethics, because swarm ethics is built on open and complex systems. It is collective, emerging, and self-organizing interactions. Hyperconnected environments where ethics is emerging, collectively shaped in real time. It's fast and rapidly scalable. And we will go to the next slide and say another buzzword. The other buzzword is systems, systemic thinking and systemic ethics. Because traditional ethics does not need to be erased. On the contrary, it needs a lifting. And we all see what happens around us. Every industry is going through systemic paradigm shifts. Healthcare, medicine, we go from average medicine to precision health, to preventive health, to ad hominem health. Law, when we have scholars like Thibaut Schreppel, I just have a few of his latest articles. They say complexity science for antitrust lawyers, systemic approach to competition law, decentralized approach to complexity economics. So finance, education, spatial computing, we see systemic paradigm shifts everywhere. So why not ethics? And it's nothing new, because already systems were colliding in the 50s, especially when the cyberneticists like Heinz von Förster were opening up the field of systemic thinking. And he said, hard natural sciences and the soft natural sciences and humanities, when they collide, then we do have several frictions. The quote says, the hard sciences are successful because they deal with soft problems. But when soft sciences, like ethics or philosophy, have to fight because they are dealing with the hard problems. And that's exactly where we stand right now. And at this point, I will hand over the presentation to Daniele, who will open up with swarms and swarm intelligence, which are pillars of our novel, innovative approach to ethics.
Yes, Katja, thank you very much for the great introduction. Let me allow myself to join you in thanking Janice and all the Institute to have us here. What I will talk about to get started is a little bit of a step back. Therefore, I will put in the fridge ethics for a second and go back to these words, the very first part of our idea. Because I think this is very important didactically, historically, and to put all the discourse into perspective. Now, when we talk about swarms, you might get pictures like this, self-coordinated flock of birds, swarms of insects, also potentially, school of fish. All in all, they are just systems where the single individual actions are able to get the emergence of some coordinated action for the whole system. That's the very basic idea, and the idea by which swarms were started to be studied in complex systems, in biology, in technology, and how eventually these percolated into human societies. There are overall 3 rules to get something that can be called a swarm intelligence. A beholder, someone from the external, must see that all the agents move in the same direction. So to speak, they self-coordinate. They do not go randomly scattered anywhere else. And, well, this is nice for fish and birds, for instance, they avoid collisions with their neighbors. What does this mean for humans? That there are some very basic self-ingrained rules that lead then to the emergence of the much more complex phenomenon. And principles for the intelligence itself are the awareness. So, of course, you need to be able to sense your environment and get information. You need to be able to self-coordinate, of course, not just being fully reactive or being, I don't know, a robot just poked from the outside from an external controller. There's solidarity, therefore having a look at new tasks iteratively, therefore never stopping, learning and doing. The system, once all the members are aggregated, should then behave as a larger body. You can be able to recognize that something extra is happening, and also resiliency. The system as a whole, like a flock of birds, is resilient to the removal or to the disalignment of single individuals. Now, this is all nice and sound, and again, in biology and technology, it can be okay. And you might wonder, yes, but what about humans? You might be pretty flabbergasted to learn that humans also showcase such behaviors. You can think of crowds where the fluxes start to self-organize. A trivial example, you want to go to fetch a beer in a concert. It's not that someone actually puts you in a queue. By looking at the behavior of your neighbors, eventually something greater, such as a flux among a crowd of people, emerge and occur. But most importantly, and this is where we finally get the bridging to the anthropology and finally ethics, these same phenomena and dynamics have been recognized in opinion formation, social influence, and the emergence of collective dynamics out of single, let's call them social molecules. And therefore, why now? Why does warmetics can finally be built and bridge from those very concepts and from the traditional ethics? Well, the overarching hypothesis is ethics is also an emergent phenomenon from social moral molecules, as we are, as Katja mentioned, open systems within open systems. And why now? Because the information flow is enormous, not only in terms of volume, as the gigabytes that Katja mentioned before, but also in the possibility of connecting with the others in a hyperactive way, fast, forward moving. Therefore, imagine to have your peers connected on a social network, on your local community, on everywhere in the world, since now this is being potentially given to everybody by the new technologies. Then the single idea is we might all be moral singletons, moral molecules, that we can somehow distribute along a certain mean. In this case, the external beholder will be able to lift this mean and therefore call what is happening in the whole society as ethics. And therefore, we view swarm ethics not as an engraved consequential ethics, but consensus from swarms of ideas. And now that I have set the stage in a more, let's say, hard science setting, to borrow Heinz Professor's words, I give the ball back to Katja in order to complete the bridging to traditional ethics.
And thank you, Daniele. And now I'm sliding back to the soft sciences again. And we will see when we compare swarm ethics to traditional ethics, it is no tabula rasa at all. When we have a look at traditional ethics, we mostly focus on Western ethics. Ethics is part of actional philosophy. We talk about virtue ethics, deontological ethics, consequential ethics. It is mainly an individual intelligence exercise. Lawrence Kohlberg described the 8-step process of moral maturity, which is a cognitive individual evolution. It is also an individual process, which the wiser, the older we get, the wiser we get, apparently. It is normative. It is top-down. We have Kant, we have Rawls, we have Habermas, we have Floridi, we have Descartes, Spinoza, everybody. And it is slow. It is, like Daniele just said, it is hard-coded. It is slow. It moves very slowly. Let's compare it to swarm ethics. Swarm ethics, on the other hand, is pluricultural because it's an open system. It is open to new ideas. It's the new that feeds the swarm. And the philosophical, well, we said at the beginning, it stands at the crossroads of three disciplines. We incorporate anthropology, which means our behavior, complex systems that we just heard with Daniele, and also digital technologies. And then swarm ethics is collective intelligence. Like Ubuntu, it's a different version of ethics. It's a community ethics. It's a collective approach to living together. Here we have a collective intelligence. Opposed to cognitive evolution, we have perception interaction-based. Daniele said the hyperconnectivity is key. So we have to look at the next other. It's not just us. We are not just singletons. We are embedded. And even better than embedded, we are integrated. It's a collective emerging interaction. So the molecules together, they create patterns. And this pattern again influences the molecules. So it's a collective emerging interaction. Normative, it certainly isn't, because it's self-organizing. We don't have a leader. It's nobody who's going to tell us what we should do. We have self-empowerment. So top-down, no. In a swarm, it's horizontal. And it's the looking, not up and down, but it's looking to the right and to the left. It's looking to our families. It's looking to our friends. It's looking, these are the highest influences we have. Our parents, our education. And then, well, swarm ethics is fast because it uses digital technologies. It's scalable. The swarm is augmenting extremely rapidly. And this is a major also difference with traditional ethics, which is static, which is a closed value system, whereas swarm ethics is dynamic. It's an open value system, a shapeable, adaptable value system. And in the next slide, we will see that there are three catalysts. We all know that systems on this planet Earth, they follow the rule of natural law. A system has a purpose, and the purpose is to be effective and efficient. So it needs catalysts. And we have distinguished three catalysts. First of all, on the mechanism level, how does it work? Our swarm ethics adds a layer of polysensory perception action. And that's because we are influenceable, we are open, we are looking, we are reflecting, we are thinking, we are talking to each other. So it acknowledges humans as complex systems within complex systems. We are responsive in open, non-linear systems. This is nothing new. Claude Shannon with the communication theory already talked about feedback loop. The cyberneticist said so, but and Daniele is pointing it out much better later than I do. Here we are talking about open systems. The second catalyst, and that's an important one because it answers the questions, what is the nature of this perception action? Well, we have two drivers. The first driver is mutuality and empathy, care. And philosophical anthropology which really influenced us is the social scientist René Girard and his theory of mimetic, which means that even in a corporate setting, the business unit is influenced, can be influenced by another business unit. So we are always looking around and comparing each other to the next other. And then we have also Frans de Waal, who is adaptive behavior, who actually analyzed the behavior of members within communities. And he found out that the notion of care, empathy, is an actual driver for cohesion. The third catalyst, and that's the one which differentiates it from traditional ethics, mainly, is that we move from the conceptual basis of ethics to a systemic ethics. We use ethics as something dynamic that can be used in business, that can be used in everyday life. So actually what we do, we give ethics back its vitality, its vivacity, and we can use it every day. And it's not something dusty that belonged to an elite, but it empowers us in our daily life. And here we have open systems with information exchanges, external stimuli and interactions. That's based on Ludwig van Bertalanffy's theory of open systems. So these are the three catalysts that we have, how would I say, identified. On the next slide, which is a very sober slide, but it is very deep in meaning, we see actually what swarm ethics is about. Swarm ethics is not linear. It is built on circularity. And in the center, we do have us. We are now not empty envelopes. We have values, we have stimuli, we have an individual emotional intelligence which feeds the collective swarm intelligence. This collective swarm intelligence again feeds the swarm ethics that we all build and shape together. So what are actually the findings here? First of all, the circularity. The second is the mobility. It is a perpetuum mobile. These interactions always happen non-stop. And that's what this incessant feeding makes this system so resilient. And the integration, like Daniele said, molecules, but we are molecules in a 360-degree digital biosphere. And this circularity reminds us of the symbolism of the Ouroboros, the unity. And this is the slide, Janice, I was talking about earlier, that I have a slide for you because I can imagine that you will think of Plotinus here, of the henosis, the one. We have intelligence, we have the soul, we have the one. That's exactly what we also want to say. It is something where we are a pantheistic, I would even say, cosmic philosophy where everything is intertwined. And this virtuous cycle is the feeding or the core of what we actually strive for when we talk about swarm ethics. And it's like Antoine Lavoisier said. He said, nothing is lost, nothing is gained, everything is transformed. And that's exactly what happens. We don't erase traditional ethics. It is transformed. It is made, let's say, a little bit more vivace. So I will hand over again to Daniele, and he will emphasize the importance of digital tools when it comes to swarm ethics. Please, Daniele.
Yes, thank you very much. So back to harder topics. potentially, which means how do all those principles eventually translate and thrive in the real world, let's say, in the everyday life that is so much characterized by digital tools, by exchanges of information, by new generations. Let's get started with the digital tools. Here, the key point is that the merging of those groups is rapidly scalable. Why is that so? Let's take a historical perspective. Middle Ages, Kant, basically whomever until more or less the internet revolution and the globalization that was, or maybe didn't follow, evolved at the same time. Let's say. What happened there in societies mostly? There was either a single thinker, hubs within a network, behaving as trendsetters or models. Or on the opposite side, you might have just few links, yourself, your neighbor, whomever you're able to reach within a day of horseback ride. But now let's think about what happens today. We are in a digital age. Giant networks form worldwide. This is beyond globalization. Globalization means everybody together, but this is everybody together every single moment. The time here is the key, more even than just the size of the network. And in this case, it's much decentralized. There exist hubs. You can think of influencers, for instance, but all the rest is very homogeneous. It's very horizontal. And the speed of information spreading is massively higher. You're able to exchange messages with your peers on the opposite side of the world almost instantaneously. And eventually, there's this idea of dynamic pluralism. Relativism, in this case, is something static. There are barriers between cultures and ethics. However, what we experience is a pluralism of them, the ability of cross-contaminate, of shaping, of eventually swarming together towards some higher emerging intelligence. And in this case, the conditions that we have identified for such a digital age, and therefore I connect back to the question, why now for medics, is that the interconnectivity is on a completely different scale than it ever been. Then, of course, there's the idea that eventually the modern molecules, the people, share similar cost functions. I call them this way, borrowing from cybernetics and engineering, but you can think of it as goals, objective values, something that is somehow shared at the core, similarly to the inner of the circle that Katja just shared. And this not only enables the starting of the swarm, but gets feedback by the swarm itself, and therefore can become even more powerful. And then you have the tendency to align. Again, this is still reinforced in a circular way, and this well connects to the notion of trust. I would follow your idea and direction and eventually coordinate with you, even in opinion, conditions, behaviors, and ethics, if there is this trust. And the more I align, the more I have the tendency to trust you and therefore align. Meaning that eventually the human and ethical swarm will be able to create and promote this self-organized flocking that we have seen at the very beginning, not just to find praise, but in order to better thrive and survive in the world. Finally, from my side, I will just give you a brief example on polarization. Polarization that has been very well studied in the behavioral sciences, mostly considering opinions rather than just ethics. This framework is able to explain the emergence of polarization not because of some sin going against the top-down virtue ethics, but as a emergent phenomenon. Now, consider the potential that trust doesn't fully exist. So you might have people tending to align, but also tending to reject, simply because they see themselves distant from that mean that I was talking before. So the majority ethics. If you have such a mixture of principles in this pluralism, in this global pluralism, sorry, you might very well encounter such situations. And therefore, whenever you get people tending to be on the edges, well, in this case, polarization can just be an emergent property of the dynamics within the single population. And then again, this connects to the comment that I did before. This is beyond relativism. Swarmatics is dynamics. Without this kind of everyday evolution, you won't have such phenomena to occur, for instance, if everything was static. So in this case, the pluralism that swarmatics brings allows us to better understand phenomena, to allow mixtures and the ever-ending creation and disruption of new boundaries, and therefore, again, thrive better together in the world.
Well, Daniele just showed us the social mixing as an applied form of swarm ethics, and I will go into the business application of swarm ethics, and we picked trust. Because trust is one of the major concepts that's used in any kind of act, EU, AI acts. We have transparency, we have trust, we have fairness. But trust is crucial. Why is trust crucial? Because trust is intimately linked to responsibility. And with the swarm ethics, like we have just seen, we expand trust to digital trust, but also to an interoperable dynamic system. It goes again beyond the concept of trust. People will be empowered. The next point, voila. We see that trust will become agile. It will become collective. It will become nonlinear. Remember the spike and hub diagrams Daniele just showed us. We actually developed fluid frames that reproduce this kind of organization for distributed trust, for distributed responsibility within a system of decentralized hubs of responsibilities. And then we have the notion, everybody always is telling us, well, human-centric, and but we are not really following that. We are going beyond. It's not a question of centrality, it's a question of integration. A patient must be integrated into the entire system. A company or staff must be integrated. It is much more powerful than centrality. With integration, you have empowerment. And our fourth point is that this empowerment, this distributed trust, this distributed responsibility allows us to move towards what Daniele said, the cost sharing. Well, here we are doing good. It is a collective cost sharing. We have a purpose. And it's based on care and benevolence. And even for businesses, growth can be more impactful than profit. And you can even generate more profit with meaningful growth. So they don't exclude each other. On the contrary, again, it is the circularity which makes it resilient and successful. And we are moving towards one point which is extremely important to me, because most ethicists They always protect their sphere of ethics. And they say human rights is something different. We are not like that. We integrate human rights. Why? Because look at ChatGPT and all these systemic new technologies we have. We are no longer talking about harm. We are talking about large harm. We are talking about latent harm. And in this case, we need the help, we need a good ally. And human rights, which are absolute rights like dignity, we need those as allies. We cannot just be alone as ethicists. We need regulation and we need also human rights on our side as humans. Which actually leads us to our second last slide, which underscores what we say here, that new avenues. Well, the new avenues, the first new avenues are technological. Swarm ethics is in sync with the latest frontier tech, which means decentralized architectures, collective decentralized architectures. And I'm talking about federated learning, blockchain, edge computing, IoT. And just 2 weeks ago, the CERN published a huge press release where they initiated a project with the 22 European countries on trust stroke. That's the name of the project. And it's based on federated learning, collective decentralized architectures. Blockchain, we see it in finance, edge computing, in e-health, IoT, logistics, and in warfare. So swarm ethics as decentralized collective and emerging ethics is in sync with technology, but not just with technology, it's also in sync with modern business management. I have been teaching for 12 years business management at the Sorbonne, at the School of Management. And we were talking about prevention and planning management tools. These are no longer possible in the VUCA world because this was linear thinking. We now need new tools. When we are talking about KPIs, key performance indicators, we need to talk about key people indicators. We need to talk about key ethical indicators. So everything is changing, and swarm ethics can be a very effective ethical framework to accompany this transformational power. We also have the digital generations. Well, they feel the transformational power, and swarm ethics is fully embracing new needs and new lifestyle. It is fast, it is sharing, it is purpose-oriented. And we do also have, as a fourth and last new avenue, which is tremendously important when we talk about ethics, it's the individual responsibility and the collective responsibility. And Daniele showed very well that in this case, the individual responsibility and the collective responsibility, well, they merge. So human rights are important, latent harms, large language models that we all are integrating into our lives. We need to have a dynamic, flexible, agile, resilient system that accompanies us. So as a conclusion, we would say that, first of all, we go further than just a cognitive approach to traditional ethics. We go back again to the biological, to the systemic approach. Like Daniele beautifully said, moral molecules in a digital biosphere. Antonio Damasio, he is talking and writing beautifully about this idea of perception of organisms that have another kind of intelligence, which is perception. So we need to integrate it. And the second point we would like to focus on is that ethics should not be hard-coded. ethics in our hyperdynamic environment should be agile, an agile value system, which we can improve. It's not just a downscaling, we can upscale it. And we can have a collective purpose, not just the individual or the individualistic purpose. And as a third conclusion, one can see swarm ethics as a democratic booster because it empowers us. It empowers us as people. We participate again. We are integrated again. And we take ethics away from the Silicon Valley corset, which is an elitist and self-serving corset it has been put in. We give it back to people. And that's why we would say, and we like to say, that swarm ethics is actually, and like we will see it right now, is actually a collective ethics generator. And it is for people, by people, and with people. And that's very important, the democratic factor again. We give ethics again back to the people. And so ethics is an ally to humans and should not be a slave to technology, which it has now become. And this is the end of our presentation. We have a very last quote by Peter Drucker for you, which both Daniele and I, we love very much. And so we end not with Aristotle, but we will end with Peter Drucker, who said, "The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It is to act with yesterday's logic." And here we thank you. We say Evaristopoli for your kind attention, and we are, of course, open to your questions. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Katja and Daniele, for this informative and thought-provoking presentation. Before asking our participants to raise their hands and actually ask any question, we have almost 15 minutes for questions and Q&A. Just to say that you are absolutely right to mention some Neoplatonic and Plotinus ideas. Indeed, there are some echoes or signs of swarm intelligence in the descriptions of the divine mind and nous. So some Neoplatonic theories of mind really reflect some modern ideas. Just to avoid anachronism, we have to study them carefully. But indeed, there is a long discussion. It's an old concept, can be found in different civilizations, in different expressions, and actually reflecting this organic interconnection that you described, the idea of an organism that persists not only at a biological level, but extends to a kind of a cognitive and even beyond the cognitive level. But just to ask if there are any questions from our audience, which are very welcome also today.
My
hello.
She's the most wonderful person.
Oh, Katja, you're so kind. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this really very interesting presentation. I have a better understanding now of what swarm ethics is. And before I ask my question, I'd just like to commend the originality of thought. We live in a very disruptive age, and it's very good to see the conceptualization of a framework that is aligned to the disruption we see. So you're really breaking away from the linear, traditional processes of information, collection and dissemination, and thinking about it differently. And I think that is really very interesting. So now, moral molecules in a digital biosphere. My question is this. One of the challenges we have is we always ask the question, whose ethic? I could also ask, whose swarm? How does swarm ethics create a biosphere digital biosphere that overcomes the challenges that we already see of access to the sphere. We have demographics where the digital divide is actually creating desert. Even within countries, we have those who are very educated and those who are not. So just let me summarize. My question is there a danger inherent in the very nature of moral molecules in the digital biosphere that it is of accessibility? I think it's so that's my question. But to just reiterate that this is one of the first attempts I have seen to think differently about how we navigate this new digital disruptive transformative era. And I think this is certainly the way to go. And maybe this, so that's my question. It's a more technical one. How do we, how is this biosphere going to be inclusive of all peoples and all cultures so that we have a swarm that is truly creating a collective intelligence for the people, of the people, etc., and not just for a certain, we're back to this 2 square 0, for a certain digital elite. My concern. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation.
Daniele?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Very, very deep and very urgent, I would say as well. So, of course, just limiting ourselves into the digital biosphere would raise all the access problems that you just mentioned. Can be generation-wise, can be economic-wise, can be, well, structural-wise. I mean, if the internet connection is just not available in certain areas, which is the reason why, in order to promote all these great swarm, it's impossible to just talk among ourselves in a philosophy institute or in an ethical think tank, but the involvement of society at all levels must be imperative. And secondly, there's also the option of a percolation from digital to people. I explain myself a little bit better. So the idea of at least digital facilitators, I wouldn't call them leaders at all, facilitators, meaning whomever has the access to this biosphere that then brings the information back again to those who don't. I was referring before to the network, the worldwide network that has few hubs and then a more homogeneous process. Well, these hubs can also become the people connecting the digital world to the physical world, therefore bridging those who don't have access to such arena, but they should do so in a very proactive and almost as fast as the information flow in the digital arena, because otherwise without these time scales, the disconnection could happen.
Maybe I would also add the dimension of the polysensory, which is important. We, like Daniele said, we can envision it on and offline. So it is behavioral. It is certainly, how would I say, perception-wise, it is some kind of magnet that is beyond the cognition. Look, we all here, we come from different cultures. We come from different countries, different cultures. And it's exactly this that unites us here. We have one common purpose, probably, or several common purposes, explained with different semantics, different linguistics, but there is something that combines us and where we feel welcomed, where we feel open to to share, even if I don't agree 100% with Daniele or 100% with Janice, but there is like this consensus which facilitates the access to this biosphere. And the more I interact on the polysensory level, not just cognitive, and the more it opens up arenas within myself to follow the pattern, maybe. So the different feeds actually this biosphere. And that's just the contrary from a club, from nudging, from polarization. And that makes it so powerful. Maybe you won't like it and you leave again the biosphere. But there are so many reasons why you could stay. I think the reasons are larger to stay than the reasons to leave it are present. And because it goes beyond cognition, it has a deeper level. And that's why I like the slide of the Ouroboros. That's why I like to talk about Plotinus. That's why we go further than just that rational approach to ethics. So that's maybe Abiola. I don't know if it suffices.
It's good enough.
But we did our best.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very interesting question indeed, and I think it's a key issue. And we have one more question from Mr. Bombas-Gander, please.
Yes, thank you for the presentation and also the organization of this session. I really liked it, and I have really many questions. There are only a few minutes left, so I maybe can send them to you via email, and yes. I can quickly mention them and pick one out. I am myself a philosopher, and I also like to work on systemic ethics. So one of the questions I have is, so there is the concept of individual methodologism, so that you start from individuals, and often these swarm examples and the measurements there are seen. Okay, there are individuals and they look to the neighbors, but it's still an individual aspect, or is it the collective? So I think when Daniele explained this swarm, it sounded more individual methodologics, and when further up on in the presentation, it's more like ethics as a collectivity. So that's one question. Another question is what I also struggle with a lot is is swarm ethics only descriptive, or can it also be normative? So can you say this is better than that? And who can say this? Are you in a certain system, yes or no, to be able to say that? What about, and I think that's also Abiola's question maybe, what about different swarms? So we people are members of different groups with different functions. So I live in a country trying to protect its stability, but also trying to be open to refugees. But you have to, so it's different tasks, and there are conflicts. There is, and that's my last. I have many more, but another one that I find also intriguing is there is Mandeville. You probably know Mandeville, a thinker of the 18th century, and one of his points was that individual vices can lead to collective virtue. So individuals can do all kind of nasty things, but they lead to collective goods. And so I think for a swarm ethics or a philosophy of systems, this is also a very difficult thing to say, okay, you individually do in a group be like a leader who is nasty, but if the company then is strong and does a lot of good things, you're allowed to do so. So these are only a few. I have many more, but just a few questions. I just pick out one, whatever. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, Janice, I'm not entirely sure if we can have access to the chat, because then we can just share our email addresses so that every person
absolutely
reach
to us.
We can have access, but since I have your email account, you can send actually them through this recent email. There is Katja's email and my own email. So please feel free to send me or Katja and to forward to Katja later on whatever you'd like to ask. This discussion, this dialogue is extremely important, and in the spirit of swarm ethics, I think so. In this, and we can stay actually 5 or 10 more minutes, maybe maximum, if there are some other questions. And please, Katja and Daniele, you can answer.
Yes. So perhaps if you allow me, I might go with the first one, and Katja can go for the second one. So at least we can manage to cover half of them to begin with, and then see whether our good host will allow us a few more minutes for the rest. So regarding the very important question about individualism versus collectivism, this is understood in complex system theories as the bridging of the scales. How do you bridge a scale of an individual as a single system and that of a collective as a single system? And this is actually one of the hardest problems in complex system sciences, which is the reason why perhaps our presentation was not entirely clear in this, but we're trying to cover both aspects. Because as you then mentioned with your last question, which goes a little bit on the opposite side, potentially, but still within the same realm of thinking, the collective is built upon individuals, and the individuals per se belongs to a collective. Therefore, having this kind of circularity also between whomever is in the individual and the society they belong to. Now, understanding exactly whether the egg or the chicken was built first, and how does one exactly influence the other, this is the very key and core question that will eventually also lead us towards the third question about the tasks and conflicts to be much more practical. This is insofar a recognized open problem that we are among us, but of course open to the whole community for discussion, trying to crack, because this is definitely going to be the very next challenge, how to bridge those two scales, which eventually will yield to the society, the worldwide society as we know it. So I'm afraid it's not a fully satisfying question, but we also need to admit what we don't know in order to proceed.
I would like to go back to your question whether descriptive or normative. And here I would like to inject the third alternative, like we have Heinz von Förster, we should get out of this ethical dilemma, the double-sided track, and add maybe different perspectives. Our perspective certainly is neither descriptive nor normative, because we don't have a leader. It is a collective action, and it is built on emergence. It is emerging, and that's the absolute principle of cluster adaptive systems. So patterns emerge. They are not predefined. And maybe tonight, my swarm ethics, which I had in my head, due to our interactions here, might take a different turn. Who knows? So in order to overcome this descriptive and normative, which we have been trained on for so many years in all the sciences, let's think about emergence. And that's highly uncontrollable, but it is also highly robust because, like Daniele said, it avoids collision. You were asking if individual vices can lead to collective goods. I think that's a wonderful question. And Abiola, she loves these kinds of questions with the systems corruption, individual responsibilities, and is it systemic? What do we have to change? How are these intertwined? Of course, we all know, we have been teaching, well, I've been teaching for 12 years. If you have a bad apple in a class, well, it can contaminate the entire class. It can have a viral effect, positive or negative. So how do we control this? Well, that's again what Daniele just said. That's kind of difficult to say. But since we are moving on a means of a consensus and a means of patterns, of shapes, normally the power of the individual, when it is bad, can be counterbalanced by, let's say, an average of good. But it's very difficult on social media because it's scalable very fast. It is highly uncontrollable. It is easier to control in the offline than the online. And these are questions, of course, we don't have the answer yet, because it is behaviorism, it is digital technologies, but these are concerns we have to think about. And that's why it's so important we do what we do here, so that we can adjust, adapt. And that's what swarm ethics is. It's an adaptive way of shaping our approach to our own values and collective values, individual values, which might eventually merge. That would be ideal. But are we there yet? I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting questions indeed. And I think we have time for one more question, perhaps, or maybe a comment, or... Okay, yes, yes, Fabiola, please.
Sorry, if there's no one, I don't want to take anybody's spot, but it does.
No, absolutely fine.
Again, I think there's a lot that is very interesting and innovative, and I like what you say about emergence. That, let's not think in the old logic, and how this can be shaped, because we've always had, and especially what you mentioned at the last point, we've always had the power of the mob, the ethics of the mob rule, which is uncontrollable. And we see that, and how very quickly positions and how social media has a life of its own. And what I actually see in your work is that you are not shying away from the technological age in which we live. This is how opinion and dissent, and this is where it takes place now, not in ivory. The people are so fluid and mobile. I think the challenge would be, though, and I'm not a philosopher, but how do you differentiate this? I'm just going to use this word from mob ethic. Okay, it's just something to think about. And maybe I'm going back to my first, who swarm, what swarm, whose biosphere, and given the speed and rate at which these things can take shape, this is something that I'm just curious about. Maybe later on, just for your, as food for thought. Thank you.
Yes, this is another very important question. Another question that asks about the role of time and time scales. Unfortunately, we have removed that figure from the slide, so I cannot really show you something nice. But we indeed have identified at least 3 different time scales. One that is very kind of slow, it evolves, but let's say in terms of, say, years, decades. Something that is fairly fast. Imagine something that evolves in a matter of months or days, and something that is very volatile and changes every day. The last one are the bits of information that we are all sharing. The second one is the wisdom of the crowd, the ethics of the crowd, as you were mentioning it, that we can, in a marketing setting, we can call the trends and the fads that also in technology. The last one are the core values. So by being able to kind of intervene and shape the core values, think back again to Katja's circle and what is inside. That is anyway driving what happens all around them. And therefore you might somehow try to filter off what is too volatile, what is getting noisy, what is these crowd movements. So you can either, both filter off them and somehow guide them thanks to getting tired, slower trends driven by these core values that then eventually fuel up the circle.
You know, when we started, at least when I started to think about the concept, it actually, how did it start? Now you made me think about it, Abiola. I was looking at a picture. I'm not a feminist. I'm not a militant or anything. I was looking at a picture, and it was a picture from 2 years ago. It was the security committee in Munich, and they put a picture on the internet. It was on LinkedIn, and you had a table with 30 white, over 50, gray-haired men sitting there. No woman, nothing. And that picture actually caused an uproar. And not just an uproar in Europe. It caused an uproar worldwide. All ethnicities. And that was actually fascinating to me. I was like, okay, it's not just us whites who are appalled by such a discrimination, by such retrograde approach to how we should live. We had people from China, from Asia, from Africa. We had everybody who was like, this is no longer the 21st century. What is going on here? So it was a reaction of being appalled, it was a negative reaction, which actually caused this kind of magnetic field, this swarm that came together, all these people. There were, of course, feminists. I was also appalled. I'm not a feminist. Then you had all different kinds of people with all different kinds of, from different swarms, I would say. And there was this new swarm that was being built around that table, around one common purpose, which was to say, come on, this is no longer what we want. And so the emergence of new swarms, new patterns, built out of, or born out of counter reactions like we see in arts. You have symbolism is built out of a reaction to the previous movement of art. You see it in linguistics, you see it in philosophy. And I think with swarm ethics, the swarms, they continue to be either a counter reaction, a pro reaction. So it is not just one big swarm that we are. It's like what Daniele said, we have different swarms, and we can participate in different swarms. We are not just into one swarm, but as long as we follow the purpose of the swarms we are in, because we are multi-dimensional, we are not just monolithic. So just belonging to one swarm would be completely stupid. I want to belong to Abiola's swarm. I want to belong to Gianni's swarm. I want to belong to Gunther's swarm and Daniele's swarm. I want to be everywhere. So this is actually the perméabilité of the openness, which should not be descriptive, should not be normative. That's exactly what it's emerging, and it can emerge. It can emerge out of something positive I would like to be part of, or negative I would like to fight against. So the polymorphism is extremely important when it comes to finding, defining, shaping its own or adapting its own values and principles. I think what it is.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that
were you
really
asleep, Janice?
No, I was thinking something that it was very interesting. I like very much this openness of swarm ethics, and I think that I like the spirit, understand the different questions and the critical perspectives that we can follow by understanding the problem between the collective and the individual approach, or issues of the digital divide, as Viola mentioned. I think it's or this mob ethics contrasted to swarm ethics indeed. But I would like to keep this openness of swarm ethics as an ethical attitude, and also this idea of trust. I would add maybe in swarm ethics this transparency that is helpful in our morality, especially in the digital age. So my comment, and please, if I can make, I think that this idea revolves around the virtue ethics perspective, and it reminds me this Plato's note in the Republic that virtue has no master, and this lack of mastery that perhaps is there in our old, maybe solid, but monolithic, as you said, traditional ethics, could be revisited from the swarm ethics or from perspectives that have this openness to trust and transparency. And thank you very much for this idea.